Welcome, welcome to Wise Fools, everybody. This is not the Bible study that you want, you know that, but it's the Bible study that you need. Gary Varvel, my usual cohort, is making movies, Bill. He's making movies. And so he's going to be pretty busy this entire month. And so rather than do a recording, which is what we did last week, I thought it would be better if we went ahead and did a live Bible study. I got my friend Bill Rayleigh to come in and help me out. Bill and I usually do a Bible study on Monday nights, don't we?
We do.
Bill was my Sunday school teacher for years and years and years, and now he's my Bible study guy. And sometimes we shoot potato guns together, and sometimes we throw rocks out of slingshots, and then we're doing Bible study. So thanks, Bill, for being here.
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
I'm going to give a shout out to our usual cast of people. Now, Bill can't see the comments for some reason. I think it may be because he's on a smaller screen. But Sherry's here. Dee Dee is here with virtual treats, as usual. Ray Bates is here. Hey, Ray, we haven't seen you for a while. It's good to see you. Who else is here? Christine. And she was in North Carolina last week, so she brought some virtual apple crisp and pumpkin tart. It's interesting, the virtual treats that come from North Carolina. I think they can come from anywhere. Dee's here, DJers. Nerd Mom is here. The Nerd family apparently is all present, according to Nerd Mom. It's cool. Word Watcher. Christine says hi to Bill.
Howdy, howdy.
I think I saw Chance. Yep. You guys will be my company on my 7-mile walk. Are you walking right now, Chance? Like with your phone? All right. So how this works, Bill, I already told Bill how this works, but we'll read through John chapter 7, and then we will go back and we will take our, by the way, the Tetrarch of Apathy, despite the horrible handle, is actually jazzed to be here tonight. So that's cool. Welcome, Tetrarch. We'll read through the entire chapter, John chapter 7. I'm looking forward to this. And then we'll do our Bible study. So do you have a preference, Bill, top half or bottom half that you would rather read?
Doesn't matter. Chapter 7, verse 1. I guess I'll go.
Okay.
After these things, Jesus was walking in Galilee, for he was unwilling to walk in Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him. Now the feast of the Jews, Feast of Booths, was near. Can you hear me okay?
I can. It's fluttering a little bit again. I'm not sure why, but go ahead.
Therefore his brothers said to him, "Leave here and go into Judea, so that your disciples also may see your works which you are doing. For no one does anything in secret when he himself seeks to be known publicly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world." For not even his brothers were believing in him. So Jesus said to them, "My time is not yet here, but your time is always opportune. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify of it that its deeds are evil. Go up to the feast yourselves, and do not go up to this feast because of my time is not yet fully come." Having said these things to them, he stayed in Galilee. But when his brothers had gone up to the feast, then he himself went up, not publicly, but as if in secret. So the Jews were seeking him at the feast and were saying, "Where is he?" There was much grumbling among the crowds concerning him. Some were saying, "He is a good man." Others were saying, "No, on the contrary, he leads the people astray." Yet no one was speaking openly of him for fear of the Jews. But when it was now in the midst of the Jews, Jesus went up into the temple, and began to teach. The Jews then were astonished, saying, "How is it this man became learned after never being educated?" So Jesus answered them and said, "My teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. If anyone is willing to do his will, he will know of the teaching, whether it is of God or whether I speak from myself. He who speaks from himself seeks his own glory, but he who is seeking the glory of the one who sent him, he is true, and there is no unrighteousness in him. Did not Moses give you law? Yet none of you carries out the law. Why do you seek to kill me?" Uh-oh. The crowd answers, "You have a demon. Who seeks to kill you?" And Jesus answered them, "I did one deed, and you all marvel. For this reason Moses has given you circumcision, not because it is from Moses, but from the fathers. And on the Sabbath you circumcise a man. If a man receives circumcision on the Sabbath, so that the law of Moses will not be broken, you are angry with me, because I made an entire man well on the Sabbath. Do not judge according to the appearance, but judge with righteous judgment." So some of them, the people of Jerusalem, were saying, "This is not the man. Is this not the man whom they are seeking to kill? Look, he is speaking publicly, and they are saying nothing to him. The rulers do not really know that this is the Christ, do they?" You want me to continue, or you go?
I'll go.
Okay.
Are you sure you're using the American Standard Version? Because
John, let me pull this thing open and show you. ASV, it says, American Standard Version.
Well, that ASV is different from my ASV. So,
you want me to go get my NIV or my ESV?
nope, we made it this far. I'm going to go the distance, but I'm going to say words like "howbeit" because that's how mine reads.
Oh,
Verse 27.
I could have done that if you want.
Nah.
Just make up those these and thous.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to speaking a little King James.
Go ahead.
Howbeit we know this man whence he is, but when the Christ cometh, no one knoweth whence he is. Jesus therefore cried in the temple, teaching and saying, Ye both know me, and know whence I am, and I am not come of myself, but he that sent me is true, whom ye know not. I know him because I am from him, and he sent me. They sought therefore to take him, and no man laid his hand on him, because his hour was not yet come. But of the multitude many believed on him, and they said, When the Christ shall come, will he do more signs than those which this man hath done? The Pharisees heard the multitude murmuring these things concerning him, and the chief priests and Pharisees sent officers to take him. Jesus therefore said, Yet a little while I am with you, and I go unto him that sent me. Ye shall seek, and shall not find me, and where I am, ye cannot come. The Jews therefore said among themselves, Whither will this man go, that we shall not find him? Will he go into this dispersion among the Greeks, and teach the Greeks? What is this word that he said, Ye shall seek me, and shall not find me, and where I am, ye cannot come? Now on the last day, the great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried, saying, If any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. He that believeth on me, as the scripture hath said, from within him shall flow rivers of living water. But this spake he of the Spirit, which they that believed on him were to receive, for the Spirit was not yet given, because Jesus had not yet glorified. Some of the multitude, therefore, when they heard these words, said, This is of a truth the prophet. Others said, This is the Christ. But some said, What doth the Christ come out of Galilee? Hath not the scripture said that the Christ cometh of the seed of David, and from Bethlehem, the village where David was? So there arose a division in the multitude because of him. And some of them would have taken him, but no man laid hands on him. The officers therefore came to the chief priests and Pharisees, and they said unto him, Why did ye not bring him? The officers answered, Never man so spake. The Pharisees therefore answered them, Are ye also led astray? Hath any of the rulers believed on him, or of the Pharisees? But this multitude that knoweth not the law are accursed. Nicodemus saith unto them, he that came to him before, being one of them, doth our law judge a man except to first hear from himself and know what he doeth? They answered him and said unto him, art thou also of Galilee? Search and see that of Galilee ariseth no prophet. And they went every man unto his own house. And there we have it in the original American Standard Version. All right. I'm going to say a prayer real quick. Lord, thank you for your word, all of the versions of it. Help us to be wise and discerning tonight. Show us what you want us to learn. In Christ's name we ask. Amen.
Amen.
All right, Bill Rayleigh, what sayest thou in regard to this passage that we have thus read?
I always find it interesting when a chapter begins after another chapter had closed, all of us understanding that there were no chapters and verses in the original writings, but John is saying, after these things, Jesus, so it kind of gives us a following from the previous topic, if you will.
Mhm.
And I appreciate that in him, which kind of sets a different scene. It's a setup for a different scene, right?
Right. A little scene change.
So if we go back, and I really do enjoy the context of things. If you go back just a little bit into John 6, you'll see where he talks about the Passover was near, okay? And then we get into chapter 7, and we see this is actually the Feast of Booths, or Feast of Tabernacles, and there's a 6 month difference between those two. Uh, Feast of Booths or Tabernacles is actually in the latter September, October. Tishrei, I think, was the name of the month of the Jews. So we're in a time when the harvest has come in, and there is typically a lot of feasting going on among the people, in addition to the Feast of Tabernacles.
They're always feasting, it seems like.
Yeah.
And, they have a lot of celebrations, and they have a lot of commemorations. All the feasts and all of their parties were designed to remind them of things primarily that God had done. A lot of those feasts are like, you're going to do this, and then you're going to remember that the Lord took you out of Egypt, and the Lord parted the Red Sea, and the Lord sent plagues, and the whole Passover, of course, is a big reminder that you didn't die. Your firstborn did not die in Egypt, because the Lord protected you from that. And I think Gary and I have talked a few times. You and I have talked in the past about how traditions and commemorative services and feasts and things like that are not really a part of our culture at large like they were in biblical culture. We don't have the same sort of memories when it comes to, we don't do things to commemorate stuff as much as they did in certainly the Old Testament, and even in the New Testament. We just don't celebrate stuff.
Well, it gives it a special priority to the community, to the culture, whatever, and it helps generation to generation with the remembrance of those special events that have shaped and formed those people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's great value in that.
Yeah, they built altars and stuff too. Something would happen, they would build an altar, offer a sacrifice, say a prayer. So
Yeah.
they were good at marking milestones and commemorating events.
Even if the altar was just a stack of stones.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So we've got this Feast of Tabernacles, and Jesus is talking to the folks there in Galilee, and some of the people believed in who he is, and some of the people don't. Right?
And actually says his brothers.
Mm-hmm.
What brothers are these? Any
Who,
thoughts?
whose brothers are these?
Yeah, what brothers are we talking about here? Or are they talking about?
His brethren therefore said unto him, I don't know. It could be he had a couple of brothers
He
who
had
were,
what we call half brothers. Yeah.
and then he had an entourage of disciples. You know, I know we think about the 12 that are named, but there were more than that were
Oh yeah.
in his gang of followers. It could have been his actual brother. I think that it's probably a little wider than that. I think it's probably some people who are in his group, in his gang of disciples, who are, some of them are struggling in their faith.
Yep. Well, and it's mentioned in around chapter or verse 5, for not even his brothers were believing in him. So there was some doubt, there was some uncertainty among the people that actually had supposedly drawn near to him.
Right. Well, you know, sometimes it's my family that's the most skeptical about me. Not that I'm Jesus or anything, but you know, family has a way of kind of not being that impressed with you sometimes.
Yeah. Just a quick note here. Jesus, what's the whole purpose of this chapter 7 as we see it coming to a close? What do we see as important in that chapter? Jesus had gone through a period of secrecy, if you will. He had withdrawn, and we'd have to go back to other chapters to kind of wring that out. But he had been across the Sea of Galilee. He'd been in the area of Gadara, and he knew that he was being sought, so they could kill him because he was challenging the those in positions of power and authority of the Jewish faith. But he's also in these Gospels, if you will, he's called the Son of God a number of times. We find that in Matthew a lot. Mark and Luke also mention that, and in John we see it also. And he called himself the Son of God in John chapter 5, depending on translation, I guess, which makes him of that expression an equality to God. And that was very offensive to those who didn't believe in who he was. So it was a challenge to the current Jewish history and culture, if you will.
Yeah. Well, he says in verse 7, he says in verse 6 that now is not the right time for me to go, but you can go. You guys can go. He says the world can't hate you. It does hate me because I accuse it of doing evil. And that's a thing that comes up often in our Bible studies, the idea that our culture echoes the words, you know, Jesus was love, God is love. And Jesus was he just went around and showed kindness to everybody. He was loving and loving. And that was it. And that's the cultural impression of Jesus. But these are people who don't read the scripture, right? Because Jesus he got himself into all kinds of trouble because he would not stop talking about the kingdom of heaven and how his position within the kingdom of heaven, and how without him no one gets to heaven because everybody is wicked. And
Yeah.
that was sort of the theme, and that's what got him into trouble,
Yeah. Yeah.
all the time.
Yep.
So
Yeah, he speaks out boldly about those things which he knew was in agreement with God, but not in agreement with those people because they had drifted and through their history had a habit of drifting so far away from God. They took their eyes off of God and they no longer uh, listened to what their scripture was telling them to love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength, everything within you. Uh, they tend to look at as we do, and there's the application. We tend to look at the temporal things, the material things of our lives, and say those things are really important. Well, Jesus saw that in a different way in this particular circumstance here, and he's calling it evil because
mhm,
you're not placing God above all things. You're not. Your
right,
your your attitude and the way you are leading these people as the Sanhedrin, uh, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, very selfish, very wealthy people. And if you had wealth, then you were blessed. If you didn't, then there must have been some curse on you or something. Something was wrong. And
right.
Jesus tried to turn that around, and that's a hard thing to change culture in three years. You know.
Yeah, well, but he did it.
Yeah.
He did.
Well, yeah,
He
yeah.
changed everybody's culture in 3 years.
Right.
Uh,
Because he's the Christ.
right. Yeah, that's one of the things, one of the many indicators that he was something other than just a mere mortal. Just because who else in history has been able to change the world? Who
Yeah.
else has
Yeah.
changed the world without telephones or television or internet or uh, any of those things?
Yeah. So
So
in this first portion of the chapter, what about those that are? I don't know how you do this, John, but anybody on the line who's attending on this,
mhm.
any thoughts, any questions about this first setup before Jesus begins speaking?
Mm. Christine said a prophet has no honor in his hometown, as we were
Yeah.
talking a little earlier.
Yeah.
Um, Ray says it's harder to see the gifting of those we know the best. Once you've given someone a wedgie, it's hard to see him as holy.
Yeah.
uh, I would say that that's probably correct. Message wasn't something that culture wanted to hear. Not all of
True.
culture. The, the,
Right.
the powerful people in culture didn't like his message. Um,
And there's division, there's confusion, there's a split here among these people that we are seeing a little bit about. It says there's much grumbling in verse 12 concerning him.
mhm.
They're saying he's a good man. Others saying no, on the contrary, he leads them astray. So they were not in agreement.
Right.
And I truly believe that a lot of those people didn't realize that this man, even though there's no honor in his hometown, did not understand that he actually was not from Capernaum, Galilee. He was born in Bethlehem.
Right.
And I am certain, we could go back and search it out, but I'm certain the leaders knew he was born in Bethlehem.
And you think
But
they just didn't comment?
right,
They just
right.
allowed the ignorance
Well,
to go
sure.
on.
Why not allow the ignorance to play in their on their behalf?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he has down around verse 10, 11, and 12. You were talking about it. Some argued he's a good man. Others said that he's a fraud who deceives the people. But it says that no one had the courage to defend him. Even the people who were kind of okay with
Yeah.
Jesus, they didn't want to
Yeah.
say anything because they were worried about culture. And there that is again. I'm
Yeah.
concerned about my position in society. I don't want to get on the wrong side of the cool kids, and so I'm not gonna side with Jesus.
But I thought it was interesting in verse 13, it says, for fear, they didn't do this, for fear of the Jews. Well,
Mhm.
they were Jewish. What Jews
Right.
are we talking about? We're talking about the
Yeah.
aristocracy. We're talking about those in power and position, those who have the ability to affect a person's life in a matter of seconds,
Hmm.
know.
Yep. You don't. Uh, you have to think twice before you open your mouth and speak out against the status quo as perpetrated by the gatekeepers, the cultural gatekeepers, the cultural leaders.
Right.
And that hasn't changed a whole lot in you know from today. There's still, I think, in all cultures there are gatekeepers. There's the people who are in charge. There's the people who set the precedent. um, you start to notice it. I started to notice it when I was young, and they call it peer pressure. There's a certain group of kids in school, certain group of kids in the neighborhood who decide what's acceptable practice. And it's everything from how you spend your leisure time, whether you play kickball or whether you throw frisbees, or to how you dress, to how you cut your hair, um, to what you eat for lunch. I mean, it's all determined by the people who are, for some reason, designated as the ones who decide those things. And when I would look back on it after I grew up a little bit, and I could see it, but when I was in the midst of it, I didn't see it. I didn't see how much control was exerted by the people in the upper echelon of the schoolyard. But that sort of dynamic, it continues throughout your life if you let it. If you don't recognize it for what it is, which is just certain people seizing power and deciding that they're the ones who are going to decide what's in and what's out.
Well,
Um,
I think there's an important question that young people and we of this time don't always ask ourselves. Why am I giving this person or this group power to influence the way I'm thinking, the way I'm acting, the way I'm dressing, the
right.
way I'm eating? Why do I do that? And what is this position they have over me? Is it
Yeah.
real or is it just imagined? And I think these people at
Mhm.
this time in chapter 7 were dealing with much of the same thing.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I can I can give a little bit of latitude to the Jewish people who were afraid of the Sanhedrin, because they really did
Yeah,
have power. I mean,
yes, they did.
they really could put you out of the temple, or worse, as they
Yeah.
demonstrated with Christ. They actually could twist the arm of the Romans, and they could have you put to death. Um, but
And we
with
and we see a
me,
sample of that. We
yeah.
see a sample of that in chapter 8 as we get to that. But yeah, they could at their whim could change your life drastically.
Hmm. That's what Christine said. Peter knew that he was the Christ and still rebukes him. We know him and still sometimes deny his power, which is true. And Marilyn said that feared they would not have been allowed back into the temple. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And that
Yeah.
the temple, if you're a Jew, getting kicked out of the temple is like being thrown out of. It's like being thrown out of society. You're thrown out of civilization. Everybody is in the temple. And if you're outside of the temple, they're not allowed to interact with you anymore. You become anathema. You're unclean. And so, yeah, it was a big deal to cross up the Jewish leaders.
Well, I know that this is just I don't want to jump way out of the context of what we're talking about, but uh, being allowed to go into that temple was a very special thing for that culture. But we have to understand too, if we go back to Genesis 17, God and Abraham, this understanding of this covenant was for the entire world, not just the Jewish people. And we're at a
Mhm.
time now in chapter 7 where they not only despised people from the north, it was anybody that wasn't Jewish they despised. In fact, a couple hundred years ago, there were signs that were discovered in the rubble, digging around the old temple. They found a sign that said Hebrew from the Jewish people, uh, Gentiles, you're welcome in here, uh, but if you cross this line, go through this gate, you can be subject to death. So, what do you do? What do you do?
Can you imagine? Can you imagine a modern church with a with a line painted on the ground? It's like visitors welcome. Come on in. Come as you are. Don't cross this line, or we will kill you. I mean,
Yeah,
that wouldn't.
yeah,
That's not the most seeker friendly.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, so much about their lives centered around, and because their lives were filled month by month about special things that transpired in that Jewish faith, their
right.
lives were very much centered around that temple and the things that went on, and the synagogues that taught them. So if you got on the wrong side of those folks, your whole life was devastated.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Well, it's a. I think it's a lesson. Um, it wasn't until I got to, I believe I was in fifth grade, and I was outside at recess, and I was talking with the teachers would have a rotation, and so different teachers were out for recess duty, on different days of the week. And I was talking to a teacher who was on recess duty who I had had the year before. So I had already gone out. She was a fourth grade teacher, and I'd gone on to fifth grade, and I was talking to her. And my best friend at the time was a guy named Kevin, and I was telling to her that Kevin and I were on the outs, so we were having a rough patch. And she said, I will never forget it. She said to me, I don't understand why you put up with that stuff from him. And that was the end of it. That was the only statement. And in my fifth grade brain, I was like, well, what do you mean why I would put up with it? But I thought about that and thought about that and thought about, and I still think about that to this day. It's, I don't know why you put up with that stuff. And there are certain things that I see happening in culture, and I hear that voice in my head. I don't understand why you put up with this. I don't understand why you allow somebody to to treat you in a manner that they should not treat you. I don't understand why you alter your behavior in order to impress a person. Um, I don't know why you I don't know why you put up with that. But that question has helped me a lot through the years when I ask myself before I'm afraid to speak up, or before I withdraw, before I pull back my point of view. I hear that voice and I go, why am I retreating? Why am I backing down? Who am I worried about upsetting? And it's a good question to ask before you betray Christ. It's a good question to ask. Why are you letting this person, intimidate you?
Yeah. So this these verses move into a question about why does this man have such knowledge? Because he was not learned. He wasn't educated like the those who are of the aristocracy.
He went into the temple, started teaching.
Yep.
Yeah.
What did he have to say about that?
About why he would. You know what?
Yeah.
I do not have a really good handle on my I don't have a really clear understanding on what it is that Jesus knew when he was down here, because I can't wrap my mind around the creator of the universe becoming a baby. You know what I mean? The one who literally created everything in the universe is now a child in the arms of humans. Um, and he's dependent on those humans to feed him and raise him and what? Teach him how to walk, teach him how to talk, teach him
Yeah,
how to do carpentry. And
yeah,
so I will confess, I get real, it gets real murky for me how Jesus needed to be raised by parents, but then at the same time was capable of wandering into the temple and saying things that blew everybody's mind.
right, right. Could it be that much of what these people had been hearing for so many years, because it was coming from those who were recognized as the authority, and the things that Jesus said did not agree or did not fall in step with what they typically would have been saying?
Right.
And I think that's very, very true that's what it was. And Jesus pointed out that you would understand me if you understand the one who sent me, if you will.
Mm,
And if you are in agreement with understanding that, then this stuff that I'm saying will make sense to you. And I think
mm,
Jesus at that time had begun uh, to approach the spiritual realm of things rather than the physical. Okay, and anytime we start talking about God, let's think spirit and spiritual. And I do believe that's where he was going with this. When you are understanding and you are um, so intimate with the Spirit of God, you will begin to understand the things of God, not the
mhm.
things of man. I do think that's exactly where he's going with this. You don't understand me, he says, because you don't understand. You want to hear a person who's glorifying himself, not God.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right. Well, they were befuddled because he hadn't been educated. And so,
So yeah, so they thought.
yeah, so they thought.
Yeah.
But they don't, and that's the thrust of his message is, look, I know God because I'm from him, is what he says. I came from him. I was up there with him. You guys don't know him because you've never even seen him, but I've not only seen him, I've, you know, I I am him.
Right.
And it's really difficult for people, myself included, to think about a person just being qualified to teach without ever having, seemingly been taught anything. Well, we have an idea about what's necessary in order to become an authority, a teacher, and you have to go to a certain amount of school. In Christianity, you've got to go to seminary of some sort. If you don't go to seminary, then you're not really qualified to do much with any sort of authority.
Right.
But
Right.
but the authority was the thing that confounded them as well, because Jesus would, when he taught, he didn't sound like the scribes and the Pharisees, like you said, because he wasn't reciting things that were written down. He,
Exactly. And he boldly said in 28:29 there, I am from him.
right,
Whoa, wait a minute. You're speaking of the I am who was before the beginning, who is now and who always will be the same. That I am from him. That makes Jesus in equality to God.
right,
And that offended a lot of folks.
right, right. Well, he would say stuff like, "You've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." Well, and that phrasing is funny to me. You've heard it said. Well, yeah, they've heard it said. It's in the Old Testament.
Yeah,
It's in the scriptures.
yeah,
So you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, um, and that's pretty outrageous to walk into the temple and say, yeah, yeah, yeah. You've heard it
yeah,
said in your
yeah,
ancient scriptures handed
yeah.
down by Moses that an eye for an eye. But I'm saying to you
Right, right.
that there's a different system now.
Right. And I'm saying it because I am sent me.
Right.
Ooh, what a bold thing to say. That would have stunned everyone in the audience. Everyone.
Yeah. Well, he upset a lot of people. And I think that probably if I was around back then, he probably would have upset me too.
Yeah,
I mean, I
yeah,
just
and
know.
yeah, and I appreciate that point, John, because I was going to say the same thing. I can be led, I can be misled into believing or understanding certain things, and I would have been one of those folks out there who was befuddled by all of it and maybe claiming the wrong things. You know,
Hmm.
we have the benefit after the fact now. It's all laid out before us. We can unashamedly come into the Holy of Holies with God now through Christ. And
Right.
that's a mind blower right there.
Right. We have the whole scripture amassed for us. Uh, so yeah, he says in verse 16, you alluded to this. This is not my own message. It comes from God who sent me. Um, Anyone who wants to do the will of God will know whether my teaching is from God or merely my own. And that's a theme that Christ developed through his entire ministry. Was he would say, I'm just doing what my father told me to do. I'm just doing what my father told me to do. And I think that that is because Jesus um, was also, as well as a sacrifice, and the big thing was to take away the sin of the world, but he was also demonstrating how we're supposed to live. And so he was modeling submission and humility throughout his entire ministry as well.
Yep.
He kept saying, I'm not doing anything on my own power. Everything is coming from the Father. All credit and all the glory goes back to the Father. And that's um, that's a really difficult thing for people to do. Give somebody else the credit. Let somebody else take the bow. Um,
Yeah.
Verse 21, they were upset because he healed somebody.
Yeah. Now they it says they marveled, they marveled at this healing,
Hmm.
but they can't agree with everything. You
Hmm. Well, it's funny to me that the healing, and this happened more than once. He would heal somebody and then get in trouble because it was the Sabbath, or because he hadn't observed some ritual that he was supposed to observe. And so they would just completely overlook the healing itself and
yeah,
focus on the timing of that healing. And it's legalism at its finest, but I'm capable of that too. There are there are times when I will catch myself, not my finest moments, where I will focus on uh, the manner with which something was done and ignore the thing that was done. I have that. I have that capacity as well. So
yeah, yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts? You want to move on?
yeah.
So he says, "Do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment." That's
Mhm.
a tough one. How do you divorce your biased thinking from righteous judgment, righteousness? How do you do that on a daily basis?
Well, he says, don't judge by appearances,
Uh
but judge rightly.
huh.
And so the people who say that we're not supposed to judge, he says that it's not a problem with judging. You're just supposed to judge righteously, and you're not supposed to judge by appearances.
Right.
And appearances are appearances are the things that we form our first opinions with. Our appearances are what are give us our first impressions. And oftentimes it doesn't give us the whole picture. We don't know a person's motivation. We don't know a person's heart. We don't know we don't know anything about why a person is doing the thing that they're doing based on appearances. And I think that what Christ is saying is, first and foremost, um, that you don't know just by looking what's really going on. And you need to be uh, careful before you pass judgment, before you criticize and condemn a person based on what you see, um, and judge rightly. Uh, Dig a little deeper.
Yeah, what you see can be very deceiving sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Very.
Um, so, um, what verse was that?
Oh, 20 something. 20,
20,
20, 20, 24.
20, 24.
24.
All right.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. So, verse 25, right after that, some of the people living in Jerusalem were asking each other, hey, isn't this the man that they're trying to kill? But here he is speaking. He's speaking in public. Um, so, could our leaders believe that he's the Messiah? How could he be? We know where he comes from. And this is where you were talking about he's supposed to come from Bethlehem and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But they're like, isn't this the dude that everybody's trying to kill? And yet here he is, being allowed to preach in the temple. And so people are so easily confused, right? I mean, they just go from one side to the other. They don't know how to discern. And so you've got them asking questions. I mean, isn't this, wait a minute, who is this guy? I thought they were trying to kill him. So should we be listening to him? But then he does these miracles too,
Right.
Well, but there's just a lot of confusion. And when I was a younger person, I couldn't understand why everybody didn't jump on the Jesus bandwagon. I was like, why doesn't everybody become a Christian? What is the problem? And as I've gotten older, I see what the problem is, because I can imagine myself in the middle of this scenario where you've got Jesus, and he shows up and he does some miracles and he teaches, and you've never heard teaching like this before. But then there's always that contingency of people who are doubtful, and they ask questions. And then you've got above that, you've got the layer of religious leaders, the people who have some authority, the people who have been your mentors and your teachers
Right.
while you were growing up. And it would be really difficult to try to discern. If I have people who I really respect as learned and wise people, and if they have a contrary opinion to mine, or if they have something, if they point out a flaw in some system or some teaching, it affects me. It makes me go, gosh, I got to reevaluate this, because this is a person who knows what he's talking about, and he's telling me that this isn't right. And so there's just a lot of upheaval.
Okay. So after all of this uncertainty and confusion out there, it says here that the Pharisees heard the crowd muttering, and the chief priests and the Pharisees sent officers to seize him. Now those were the guards who were the temple guards that they sent. They had authority over them, not the Roman guards. So the folks that went to get him were actually from the temple, not from Rome.
The temple police.
Yes, temple police, if you want to call them that. Yeah. But it's an interesting thing that happened here. They didn't get him. So, yeah,
Well, they didn't get him.
no, they didn't. And even the temple police, if you will, were questioned. Oh, what is it? You believe in him too? You know?
Hmm.
Well, he speaks of great things, you know.
Yeah.
But you have to understand the hierarchy and the power and the position these people had. When you told a person in that position who was a guard or police, whatever, you must do something, then they were bound to do that. And
Hmm.
why they didn't was really putting their present health and their future in jeopardy. So it was a huge thing, not to be overlooked. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's akin to running afoul of uh, the police, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's sort of like disobeying the police. Um, so they were again uneasy about siding with Jesus because they didn't want to go against the authorities. They didn't want to go against the temple authorities and the leadership because there would be repercussions
Yeah. Yeah.
for doing that. And we have we have similar circumstances. Um, I think here in the U.S. we've got some people who've gone to prison for having church services during COVID, right? We've had
Yeah.
some local lockdowns, and we've had some laws enacted over the past few years that made it uncomfortable for um, for people to meet together, for people to celebrate holidays, for people to go to church, for people to get on airplanes or go into public buildings without wearing masks and showing your papers for vaccinations. And it's it's not unheard of even in our sophisticated advanced civilization. There are still certain protocols that you could get in trouble. I remember feeling weird a couple of years ago not wearing a mask in the grocery store. I remember getting
Yeah.
side-eyed by
Yeah.
people.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
And it's similar, I think. If you're going to stand up on principle, um, be prepared to have a few people um, call you out on that.
Would it be fair to jump a little bit
Sure.
ahead into, let's say, verse 37?
Yes.
Just a couple. See, I'm not sure how long you stay on these
Well, we try
times.
to we try to wrap up by in an hour, so you're
Okay.
free to, and we don't have any particular order. You can jump wherever you want to go.
Okay. Okay. Well, I wanted to particularly mention this because I see it as very important as understanding who Jesus was and looking at tradition. It says in verse 37, now on the last day, the great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried out, saying, if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. He who believes in me, as the scripture said, from his innermost being will flow rivers of living water. Now, before we jump on what he had to say, let's go back to the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. There was a ritual that took place every day during that week, and you would have a priest or a senior priest, or maybe even the high priest, take a golden jar and go out of the temple area to the pool of Siloam and ceremonially draw up water, and he would take it back and he would pour it out. And that was to recognize, number one, that water is life-giving, but it also would recognize in a form of thanks to God that the rains provided a good harvest that year. And finally, it also exemplified the spirit nature. Salvation by the Spirit would be poured out like water. You have to go back to Isaiah 44 to see where that refers to that water being of salvation. Uh, so what Jesus is saying here, hey, based on this tradition here of pouring this water out at the sacrificial area, uh,
Mhm.
listen, if you're thirsty, this water, I have it. Come to me and drink. But the water that I have is eternal. So he's saying it is salvation that I offer, this type of water that I offer. And also remember, at this time, the last day, it is deadly quiet in that whole place. There may have been hundreds of thousands of people at the end of that feast, and they are silent, watching those priests go draw the jar and come back. And then Jesus interrupts that by saying, hey, and he yells it out. He cries it out. If anyone's thirsty, let him come to me and drink. So he took their eyes off of the tradition of what they were doing and put it on him. Said, if you want salvation, come here. I have it for you.
Mhm.
An enormous declaration of I am with the I am. Okay, just some thoughts. Now the
No,
the,
yeah.
the reason I pull that up, it came from a guy named uh, Alfred Edersheim. He had several volumes he wrote over his lifetime. Messianic Jew, died in the 1880s, but an incredibly intelligent man about the temple and the life and times of Jesus. If you ever want to read 6 very, very long volumes, dig him up.
Well, you refer to Edersheim quite a bit in our Bible
Yeah,
study.
yeah, yeah. Uh,
You're a
Not as much as
fan.
the Bible, but a lot. Yeah,
Um, yeah, well, the living water thing is something that he has talked about before,
yes,
even in John. A couple of weeks ago, I think it was, we were talking about Jesus uh, telling the woman at the well
yeah,
that,
right.
and the same thing, and he makes reference to his words are spirit, and his words are life. And he's the flesh doesn't count. There's no life in the flesh, but there's life comes from the spirit. All life comes from the spirit. And then he equates his words with spirit and with life, and so all of them are the same. And it's truly it's a profound thing to say, and it's a really difficult thing to wrap your mind around. The
It
idea
is.
that words can be alive, and that water can be alive. But he talks about it a lot.
Just as I am the light of the world, you know? Light. There's a
Hmm.
whole nother subject about light we could get into.
That would be,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, that would be a long discussion if we started talking about light like we did at
yeah,
Russ's place a couple of weeks ago.
yeah.
Um, so the crowds reacted. He said, I'm going to give you this living water," and they reacted. They said some of them he's a prophet, some of them said he's a Messiah, and then some of them said he can't be because of where he's
Right.
from. And some of them even wanted him arrested. And so you had a whole bunch of different reactions,
Yep, yep.
and it was pandemonium.
As
So
it is today. Truly,
yeah,
as it is today. Yeah.
there's a lot of uh,
Where,
different
where,
opinions.
yeah, where Christ is not recognized as supreme, the supremacy of Christ, chaos exists.
Hmm.
Uncertainty, uneasiness exists because there's no calm to the soul when Christ is not there.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Well, he said back in verse 17, anyone who wants to do the will of God will know whether my teaching is from God or is merely my own. And so
Right,
there
right.
is a sort of an idea that the people who are seeking truth, the people who are wanting to to know the truth, will have it revealed. They'll find it. And the same thing sort of is said in First John, where if you seek me, you will find me. I forget which verse that is, but I'm pretty sure it's in First John. If you seek me, then you'll find me. There's the idea that anybody who goes looking for God, God will reveal himself to.
Yeah.
But the people who don't look, the people who are not interested in finding the truth, they don't see it. So the crowd's confused. Go ahead.
I also thought it was interesting that Nicodemus shows up. Yeah, toward the end of this. We hadn't heard from Nicodemus for a while, but
Not for a little
he's
while.
back. And he almost sounds sympathetic to Christ's activities here, because he's trying to, in a way, kind of defend him. But I don't know if Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea ever took the persecution that they probably deserved at that time.
I don't know. Do you think Nicodemus got persecuted?
I don't know. We don't know.
No, we don't know. We know he came under cover of darkness to talk to Jesus, so he was.
We do. And he got a lesson on rebirth,
Yeah.
But no, we just don't know. A lot of things we don't know. But that's not the main point, I think, of this chapter for us.
No.
It's not to focus on myopic vision of Nicodemus.
Right. Nicodemus does say, is it legal to convict a man before he's given a hearing? Right. Which is a good thing to say, right? I mean, he's kind of on Jesus' side without actually being super overt about it.
But it stands out because he is a man of position and wealth and power. We know that. And all of a sudden he's seen as trying to support Jesus and defend him.
Right.
And I don't think that would have set well with anybody in the upper echelon.
No. Well, it's funny. It's just he's just talking about the law. I mean, it's not legal. It's not legal to convict a guy before he's given a trial. But it's funny how quickly people want to throw out the rules in order to expedite their particular agenda.
Yep,
that's a very human thing to do. So then they had that little fight, and then my favorite verse at the end, verse 53. Everybody went home. Yeah. Everybody just went home, right? I mean, that's
well, the feast had ended, so they went home.
Well, there's no reason to hang around here. Feast is over.
Yeah,
and that's what happened to our Bible study too. Our Bible study ended, and so now everybody can go home.
Have we lost everybody?
No, they're still here. Next time we do this, you're going to have to get on a bigger screen so you can see.
I need to figure out what's not right about my computer. Yeah, all I can see is John and his smiling face, and that's about it.
See, over here on the side, there's a whole bunch of comments that are coming from Facebook and from YouTube. See, thanks, guys. Christine says, thanks, guys. Word Watcher says, thanks, guys. Thanks for tonight. Please thank Bill for us because he can't see the comments. Marilyn says, we stay to the very end. That's true. So yeah, they're still out there. And thanks everybody for being here. I'm planning, let's see. I'm not sure what we're going to do next week because I will be traveling to Texas. So if Gary's also out of commission, we may have to cancel next week, unless Bill wants to do it by himself.
Well, I'm traveling to Texas next week too.
Yeah, all right. Well, at this point, I'm going to say that it's probably going to be 2 weeks before we do another Wise Fools. But we will see you guys all in a couple of weeks.